Get ready, because today we're going to talk about 10 tips from pro editors that every writer needs to hear. This video was requested by a subscriber of mine. They said, Brandon, what do you think have been 10 of the most valuable things you've learned through the years while writing your books, making mistakes, things like that? And I thought that was a pretty good idea for a video that we could focus on some practical advice. I went through a lot of my older emails, my older documents where, I had worked with editors in the past, and I saw what they said to me that I thought really made a difference. So we're going to discuss 10 of the most valuable pieces of advice today, and they're going to range from big picture stuff all the way down to sentence level stuff. By the way, I have a new book coming out on the craft of writing. It's called Story Made Simple, and it covers the 8 key elements of storytelling. I'll post a link to it in the description below so you can learn more and pre-order a copy today. I'll also be discussing it later on in the video after we go through these 10 tips. Tip number 1 is to cut your opening scene or opening chapter. And this is a great simple piece of advice. It's not going to work for every story, but it's something that is at least worth trying. All you need to do, just open up your Word document, go to the first chapter and pretend it doesn't exist, then move on to chapter 2 and ask yourself if you can start your story right here. Now, the idea behind this is that sometimes when we write our first chapter, we're so concerned about people understanding what's going on that we include a lot of exposition, a lot of unnecessary details, and those details can get boring, and they can also prevent the reader from getting to the good stuff later on. Tip number 2 is that motivation is what creates good conflict. When I wrote bad parts and I sent an early manuscript to an editor, she took a look at it and she said to me that certain parts of the story weren't clicking with her because she didn't grasp the character's motivations. There would be some kind of major scene that would be happening where the characters clearly wanted something, but beneath that want, beneath their goals, there was nothing really going on there. There was no clear motivation driving these characters. So what you want to do in your stories, you always want your characters to have clear motivations. The motivations are the why behind what they want. So if two characters want something, maybe you have two characters who are fighting one another. If they want to win that fight, we're only going to care about that fight if we understand why each character needs to win. What is at stake for them personally? What will happen if they lose? And what will happen if they do win? Tip number 3 is the levels of character motivation. This is something I learned from Ellen Brock. She's a pro editor. She's also a YouTuber, and she helped me with my first book, Bad Parts. She was just incredible throughout the process. And one of the most important pieces of advice she shared with me was her 4 levels of character motivation. And the way this works, I've already talked about half of them in this video, but the first one is the goal, and this is what the character wants. And then underneath it, as you know, is the motivation, which is why they want that goal. And then beneath the motivation, you have the character's lie. This is something they believe about themselves or the world around them that is harming the character. So they believe something negative. And then finally, the 4th level beneath the character lie is the origin of that lie. So whatever caused that lie, whether it was a significant event in their past or a series of significant events or a series of even small events, whatever it was, that origin is what caused the lie, which causes the motivation, which eventually brings about the goal. Tip number 4 is swimming pool theory, and this is in regards to pacing. Now, when I originally wrote Bad Parts, the earlier drafts had a situation where it was like the very beginning of the story was high energy, there was a lot of things going on, things started off really hot, and then for about 150 pages in the middle of the story, all of a sudden things were low energy, they were slowed down, and it was a major pacing issue that I had to address during revisions. Once I was restructuring the story, I had to figure out how to balance out the energy. And it reminded me of something I learned from the author Nancy Kress when I attended a workshop of hers about a decade ago. And she had this idea called swimming pool theory, where she said to us that when you're thinking about the pacing in your story, think about a swimmer kicking off from the wall of a swimming pool. When they kick off from that wall, they get a nice boost of momentum, and it'll carry them across the swimming pool for a little while, but eventually they're going to have to kick off again in order to get that momentum back. And this is just a great thing to keep in mind throughout your writing process. Always ask yourself, where are you in terms of that momentum? Do you need to kick off from the wall anytime soon? And think about that in terms of planning out your story's events. Tip number 5 is to cut and combine your supporting characters. Now, whenever you write a larger story like a novel, you're going to at least have a protagonist, an antagonist, maybe 3 to 5 major supporting characters, and also some minor supporting characters mixed in as well. And depending on how your writing process goes, you might include a bunch of people just to test out different scenarios or test out different potential characters, see where things go, and by the end of the story, you might have way more characters than you need. I know I usually do. And then when I get to the revision process, the first thing I always do, I look at my cast of characters and I ask myself, who needs to go? Who can I cut from the story? Then the next thing I ask myself is, what 2 characters can I combine into 1 character? And this is something that worked really well for me in Bad Parts, because originally I had 2 cop characters in the story. One was like the head of the town police, and then there was like a deputy. And when I wrote the original draft, they were both kind of like unfinished characters. And what I did was I combined them into the same person, and it ended up making them a much more dynamic character. So always look for opportunities like this during the revision process, or even during your writing process. Maybe you're writing someone and you like this particular character, but something's missing, and then maybe you have another character with a similar function or personality who can be fused into that first character. Tip number 6 is to make sure that your big secrets and revelations have dramatic purpose. And this is very important because we want major secrets and exciting revelations and huge plot twists in our story. But we don't want to overdo it to the point that there's so many of these revelations that it loses its effect, or worse yet, that you make too many promises that you can't deliver on. So rather than doing something like that, make sure that every revelation in your story has dramatic purpose, that it impacts the characters as well as the audience. If you're planning to have a bunch of colorful explosions throughout your plot, make sure there is substance beneath each of those explosions. You don't want shock value for the sake of shock value. Always connect it back to character. Tip number 7 is to condense multiple themes into one. Now, when we're talking about a story's theme, usually we want to have just one central theme that we approach from different angles. While you certainly can have multiple major themes in a larger story, ideally you want to stick with one and then just, again, have your different characters approach it from different ways. When I wrote Bad Parts, I originally had multiple themes that were loosely connected, and it was muddying up the story. So what Ellen Brock told me to do, she said to focus on one particular theme. And she looked at the story and she said that she felt the main theme was how far will wounded people go in order to feel loved again. And once she pointed this out to me, everything clicked for me and I was able to focus my characters better. So figure out your story's central theme, then ask yourself if all your characters are exploring that theme in some way. If they're not, either revise the theme or revise the characters so that both are connecting. Tip number 8, cut sentences that don't add meaning. You want to do this in order to lower your word count and boost your pacing. When you're editing your stories, look to cut any sentence that states the obvious. Now, this might sound a little vague, so I'm going to include an example here. This is from the opening chapter of Bad Parts, when an old man is trapped in the back of a car and trying to call 911. I'll read the original version first, then the revised version that my copy editor suggested. Here's the original. A pothole rattled the car and shook the phone from his fingers. No, it fell behind him. He had to reach it somehow. As he pushed against his restraints, his kidneys flared like hot steel in his lower back. Here's the revised version. A pothole rattled the car and shook the phone from his fingers. No, it fell behind him. As he pushed against his restraints, his kidneys flared like hot steel in his lower back. So what we cut is, he had to reach it somehow. That sentence adds nothing to the story because as soon as he drops the phone, it's understood that he has to get it back. We don't need to state the obvious here. We can just move on to his next action. And of course, the other problem here is that the sentence contains the word somehow, which is something we always want to avoid. Tip number 9, stick to cause and effect sentence structure. This means that in order for our writing to flow as smoothly as possible, we need to arrange our sentences in this way. Something happens, which causes something else to happen, which causes something else to happen, and so on. Now, sometimes when we're writing our sentences, we want to spruce things up, we want to make things flash, and what we do is we start moving words around, we twist our sentences around, and it actually makes the sentences harder to digest because we shake up the sequence of events. Here's an example. I'll read the original version first, then the edited version. Here's the original. Michael spilled his drink, he was shaking so hard. Here's the edited version. Michael shook so hard he spilled his drink. So in the original, we get the spill, then the cause of the spill, which is backwards. It makes sense, but it trips up the reader because things are out of order. In the revised version, however, we get the shaking first, which causes the spill, and here everything flows smoothly. Finally, tip number 10 is to avoid the word almost. Almost is something that didn't happen. And it's a very indecisive word to use in your writing, so be careful if you do include it in your stories. Usually, you're either going to want to say that something did happen or it didn't happen. Don't say it almost happened. So you might say something like, he almost told her he loved her. No, either he did or he didn't. Maybe he wanted to tell her, but he stopped himself. But don't include the word almost. Or you might say something like, he almost crashed his car into the concrete divider. No, either he did or he didn't. Maybe he drove so close that he scratched the paint or he lost a side view mirror, but he either did or didn't hit the divider. All right, now before we wrap up this video, real quick, I want to talk about my new book, Story Made Simple. I've been working on this for the past year and a half. I never intended to take a year and a half, but it was something that required so many revisions to get right because I was getting a lot of great feedback from friends, people in the writing community, even channel members and Patreons and subscribers. There was a lot of feedback that I wanted to implement in order to make this book as best as it could possibly be. And I also wanted to capture the spirit of my channel and my videos. So as you can see, this book is thin. It's something you could rip through in a weekend. It gets right to the point, no nonsense. There's no fluff in this thing. And it focuses on the 8 key elements of storytelling. Things like character and world building and plot and theme and pacing. All those important things that you need in order to build a story are going to be covered here. And this is going to be great whether you're a beginner or you're an advanced writer. There's plenty of actionable tips that you'll come across in here, all kinds of different insights. It's all backed up with different examples from popular movies, TV shows, and other stories. So if you are a fan of my channel and you like the type of advice I give, this is definitely a book you'll want to check out. And it contains a lot of information that you won't find in any of my videos. I want to say it's about 50-50 in terms of stuff that if you are a big fan of my channel and you've watched all my videos, you'll see some things in here that'll be like, oh yeah, I've definitely seen that in Brandon's videos before. And then you'll turn the page and you'll find something that I've never discussed before. So there's a lot of great content in here, whether it's a refresher of something you've already heard or some brand new stuff that'll just blow your mind. I'll post a link to the book in the description below. Definitely pick up a copy if you're interested in boosting your skills and mastering the craft. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, what is the best writing advice you've learned from a teacher, mentor, or editor? Let us know in the comments section below.